We all share some version of an unhealthy relationship with money. So I named it from Reconstructing Wealth because I knew that in the long term, if I could reconstruct somebody's relationship with wealth, with their money, I could quite literally change their life.
If you don't tell your money where to go, it will tell you where to go. That's why
You're right.
budgeting is really important.
On paper, my personal finances are starting to look worse than ever, yet emotionally, I'm feeling better than ever. Made no sense. I was actually rewiring my mindset around money just through the act of giving. And that is the marking point, the inflection point of my financial journey where things really started to change.
When I started to read The Millionaire Next Door, I began to understand hyper consumers. They consumed more than they produced. They were making good money, but they consumed it with their flashy cars and big homes.
Financial freedom to me is not having enough money to fund your life. Financial freedom to me is learning how it works so you can emotionally detach from it. Because I know enough people in my life now that plenty have enough money to fund their life that worry every day about it. And to me, that's not real freedom.
Well, hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Lab. And this time we're going to do things just a little bit different. And I'm really excited about a guest that I have here. So first of all, I'm going to introduce our guest, and then I'm going to give a little background. Then I'm going to let him give a little background, but I want to kind of set the story up just a bit. But Matt, thank you for joining me here on the Leadership Lab.
Thank you, Asbel. Man, it's an honor. I've been looking forward to this podcast for a while.
Well, I'm looking forward to it because I'm excited about the topic that you're talking about. And I'm getting a little bit away from healthcare just a bit, but I guess we could say it has a little bit about healthcare. But I want to first say how I actually met you for the first time, Matt. And this was something where my business partner and I joined a group. It's always been something that I have, as probably a young child, when I began to learn about that, probably dates John Maxwell a little bit. But when I've always admired who he was from the time that he was a pastor, and then he became to do this leadership. And when I had the opportunity to join this high capacity leadership thing that Chad Johnson had started with John Maxwell being a mentor, I jumped at that chance, and I had reached out to my business partner to see if he wanted to join. And of course he did. And I met you through this program of just a few leaders that get together and kind of what we talk about, iron sharpens iron in our faith-based community. So when I saw that, and I saw a little podcast that you had done, I don't know, I was doing something and I heard your story of your construct around wealth management and your background of who you were that got you into that followed and espoused the same thoughts that I had. My parents had always taught me, my dad specifically, son, if you pursue what is right and always do the right thing, money will always follow to propel your dream. And that's what your construct is around wealth management. So I want you to introduce yourself to the audience. Many in my audience probably don't even know who you are. So I want you to kind of talk about that background of who you are, what brought you here, and then we're going to get into this subject because I'm excited about talking about it. I'm excited about what I'm going to learn from what you have through our dialogue as well. So Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Super cool intro. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah. My name is Matt Morizio. I have a wealth management firm. It's named Reconstructing Wealth. And it's because of what you just talked about. I've learned after thousands of conversations with people at this point about their money, their personal money, something that's so intimate to somebody. When they open up and they share with me, I've learned that we all, myself included, I'm often case study number one for what we talk about. We all share on varying degrees of the spectrum. We all share some version of an unhealthy relationship with money. So I named it from Reconstructing Wealth because I knew that in the long term, if I could reconstruct somebody's relationship with wealth, with their money, I could quite literally change their life because I've experienced it firsthand. I'm a better father. I'm a more present husband. I'm actually a more effective leader in my work because I don't carry that, what I didn't realize I had, this dull burden sometimes. Sometimes it was this heavy weight to bear of financial pressure because I've learned as best as humanly possible to emotionally detach from money. So I knew that if I could do that for people, I could change their lives. And more importantly, I could break what is probably a generational chain in that family's lineage so that no more their kids, their children's children will no longer view and use money the same way. I didn't start there. I mean, I started in baseball. So a million years ago, I was chasing 20-year dream of playing professional baseball. So I played with the Royals for 5 years. And when that dream was ended, they released me, which is the kind way of baseball by saying fired. I got fired. Um, I went on this like business journey. I had been married recently, and then I had my first child, and I was jobless. And I went into this finance staffing firm thinking like, "You're a staffing firm, please help me find a job." They eventually found me a job. It was to work for them, which was not the plan. But I cut my teeth in sales there, and through all of the relationships of CFOs and financial managers I built over 4.5 years, I got introduced to wealth management in one of my just 10 to 12 meetings a week that I was called to do. That was my KPI. It was a big behemoth of a staffing firm, and they had those key performance indicators. That's how I got into wealth management. And I just feel like, because I know your heart, Asbel, I know you'll appreciate this. I prayerfully asked not to move forward with this opportunity. I knew I needed a new job. I was in the middle of this unhappy marriage in my staffing world where it was temp staffing. Somebody was taking a temporary job and they didn't want it, often in the medical billing, patient access space. That was a big role of mine. So some of the biggest hospital systems in Maine and Boston, that they were my clients. But they didn't want a temporary job. They wanted a permanent job. And this hiring manager probably had somebody leave them and had a vacancy. And so they were angry. And I'm in the middle of this unhappy marriage and making money in the middle of that. So I knew this wasn't a career for me. But as I was praying for this new opportunity, and then wealth management came to me, as an athlete, I had been introduced to a number of financial advisors trying to court me because, if I made the big leagues, I was going to make a bunch of money. And joke's on them, I never did. So they wasted their time. But I got to learn what they did. And then I built this relationship, the tons of relationships with people in that finance world. And I never was very impressed with a single advisor, not because they weren't good people, but because what they did all sounded the same. And I knew, because I was in staffing and I was the same as my competitor, if I was going to go and change careers, I really wanted to present more than just me, like me more than the next financial advisor. That's kind of how I saw that world. So I didn't want it. And I prayerfully asked God, please, God, give me a new opportunity. I don't want this one. This doesn't. And no matter how hard I tried, it was like I tried to close the door and he blew it wide open every single time. He showed me all the reasons I needed to step forward when I tried not to. And do you know, I think the only other time I've prayed, God, please don't let this be right, was when I met my wife. I was in Newport Beach, California, single, playing professional sports, about to go to spring training, Arizona. My wife lives in Massachusetts. I was just home for Christmas and I met a girl, and I had no interest in marrying a Massachusetts girl. I was living the dream. And you know what's even funnier? She was in the other corner of the country praying the same dream. Please don't let this be right.
Look at
And I'll tell
God.
you, I guess maybe
How
that's like a sign for me. Anytime I pray to God that please don't let this happen, I can almost guarantee that it's going to be happening. And it's going to be a good thing too. So
yeah.
that's a long-winded background on who I am. I should also mention that I've been married to her for 15 years now. We have 7 with our 8th child on the way. So God
I
has a
was
good
hoping
plan.
you were gonna mention that because I was like,
Yeah, God's got plans that I don't ever see, and he's got better plans than I could ever imagine.
you better be glad you're in wealth management. So let's
Hey,
let's
I'm a guarantee policy for any client. Like, look, if anybody needs to know how to stretch a dollar, it's me, so I can figure out how to make it work for you too.
I love it. I love it. So this is what I've always been taught. I was actually having this conversation a few nights ago. And I was no, actually, I exaggerate there. I was actually speaking to a group of leaders at my church yesterday morning, and I was talking about having courage in the uncomfortable. And we were talking about one thing, and it's literally about integrity. And I started this. There's 2 people that are probably leaders that I've always admired. One was John Maxwell. Of course, we've been able to meet him. The second one is Dr. Henry Cloud, who I probably had been admiring from afar way before even John Maxwell. And he wrote this book called Integrity.
Mm.
And it revolutionized who I was as a leader. I mean, I'll dust it off every once in a while and read it, but there's something that was said in that book that said, want to understand who a person really is, give them power or give them money. And the moment you do that, you'll begin to understand who that person is. And so what you just said is what I heard. And I'm like, I've got to have him on the podcast because we got to share this with a lot of people. You don't necessarily need to be faith-based. And if you're listening today and you don't believe in a Christ, you don't have, these principles are far reaching outside of that.
Yeah.
But when you said disassociating yourself from money, money doesn't define me. And I had to learn that. And the best person that I like to listen to is the person that has already been through it to understand it, because they've lived it already. And so they've got wisdom that has come through that journey. And that's, now I don't want to live your journey of eight kids, but I do want to understand this philosophy and how it shaped you. Like, because you said you didn't start here.
Yeah.
So what was that general premise? I'm going off script a little bit here, but what was that general premise, Matt, that took you from saying, I've got to get a handle? I know what mine was. I'll share that with, but I want you to talk to us about that.
That made me realize that money had its grips on me and I wasn't in control of it. Well, I can tell you the moment that I realized that I needed to make a change in the decision I made, I think the answer is bigger than that. I think the answer is a much deeper introspective journey on, like, why do I think about money the way I do? And that's probably a childhood story around money that you've learned and you've never changed. We don't need to necessarily go there, although I can. For me, if you hear, as you've heard my story, my journey, my body of work, let's say, of my life so far, 8 kids, almost, homeschooling, pro athlete, chasing a dream for 20 years. I was a top performer at that staffing firm, even though I knew I didn't like it. I was, on the paid all incentive trips. I'm not a toe dipper kind of person, a fence rider. If I'm going to do something, I'm an all in. I'm a head first guy. And it's evident in the way my life is modeled, like the way I live it, except when it came to tithing, to giving. I had always wanted to. It was like this calling on my heart. And like you said, you don't need to be a person of faith you can call it whatever you want. You wanted to be more generous. You wanted to use your money for other people. You wanted to give away a little bit, share the wealth. There was a tug on my heart that's like wanted to be consistent with that. And sometimes I would, and other times depending on the month, I'd say, there's not even enough to hardly cover the bills. Like, God doesn't want me to give in this moment. Like, I'm not supposed, that's a fiscally irresponsible thing to do. So I shouldn't do it. And I would tell myself all the right reasons why I shouldn't pay that time. And maybe I could squeeze a little out this month. And the reality was I was toe dipping. I was fence riding when it came to committing to giving. And I couldn't stand it anymore. I decided, I had a conversation with my wife. I remember, I'm like, listen, Addie's my wife. I'm like, Addie, I know that we aren't rolling in it right now, but I can't shake this feeling on my heart every morning in my quiet time that, like, I'm feeling called to give. And it's not even the amount. I don't know what the amount is. I'm just feeling called to give consistently. And I can't do it. I can't figure out how to do it, but I need to commit to it. But I need you to be on board, because there's no secrets with us, and especially when it comes to money. I don't like money secrets. They don't do well in a marriage. So I told her, like, this is where it's on my heart. Are you in? Like, will you walk with me in this? And she said, of course. Like, we have this rule in our house, which is, I think, probably a pretty safe rule. If we feel like there's something put on our heart in prayer time, like, it's not our position to step in between us and God. So, like, okay, if you feel like you're hearing that, then I support that. So in order for me to make that work, I needed to set up a separate bank account. I knew myself. I mean, shoot, my past experience proved that if I left my money in my own account, I was going to find the reasons to do other things. And I wasn't like out spending. It was just like I had fiscally responsible rationale to say it doesn't make sense to give this month. So if I put it in a separate account, the way my brain works, I could compartmentalize, like, the money in my account is mine. The money in this account is not mine. This is for other people. So I can't use this money. I can only use this money. And in doing that, we call it our blessing account. Every time we get paid now, we put 10%, but you can put we we change, we increase, but it's not about the amount. It's the disciplined process of doing that. That
Say that again, because to our audience that's listening to this right now that may have an issue, like we make enough money. I remember um, reading the book, The Millionaire Next Door. It kind of revolutionized how I thought about
yeah.
money, and high value earners are not necessarily worth as much money as maybe what we would consider uh, um, um, uh, earners that I think at the time when I read the book, they were making $75,000 a year, and the data was showing that these were high capacity earners from a net worth perspective. People that were
Yeah.
making $500,000 a year were spending $500,000, so their net worth was zero. So
Yeah.
that kind of revolutionized to say, you know what, because I had always thought, Matt, that I need to make more money in order to invest more, to make more. And so my vision started or whatever. So you just made a statement right now that I
Mm.
want people to hear, because that's a revolutionary statement to the concept of money.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. Yes, I recognize that like money had its grips on me. And if I didn't do something different, if I didn't take the reins and try to regain control of it, it was going to become this false idol for me. I was going to be chasing it. And I
Like
didn't even
Dave
know it.
Ramsey says that if you don't tell your money where to go, it will tell you where to go. That's why
You're right.
budgeting is really important. That is that, and you don't need to be faith-based. I love the faith-based because I'm a faith-based principle. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt your, but I'm getting excited just listening to you. I'm like thinking we've got to hear this as a society.
We've got to. Let me, I will show you, I'll give you a little bit of science behind it um, after I'll finish. So I set up this separate bank account and I started contributing money to it whenever I got paid. Whenever I got paid, I put money into that. And it started to grow. And it was actually like fun to use it for people. That wasn't the intent. The intent was like I wanted to release control. We all have this, Asbel. As I sit with more and more people who talk about their money and worry about their money, it doesn't matter. Like financial freedom to me is not having enough money to fund your life. Financial freedom to me is learning how it works so you can emotionally detach from it. Because I know enough people in my life now that plenty have enough money to fund their life that worry every day about it. And to me, that's not real freedom. So I recognize we all have this illusion of control with our finances. We do it in other areas too. We do have this illusion of control with our lives. um, if I only earn more, then I can invest. If I make this strategic job change, or I sell this one product, or land this big client, if I, you know, all of a sudden we find like we're in the driver's seat suddenly. Reality is like we don't have control over any of it. Um, and this is not even a faith-based thing. Like if you believe like the stock market's going to grow 10% a year, you could experience an '08 and lose 40, 50% like that, and you had zero control over that. What are you going to do? Right? It's how you have to respond to that. But the illusion of control, I've been a disciplined to say investor for my entire life. And now all of a sudden 50% down. What do? There's no control anyway. So in my effort to put money in its place, to understand the hierarchy of what the importance of it in my life, I needed to tell it what to do. I couldn't let it guide my decision making anymore because that's what was happening. So I put that money in this blessing account, and I heard Dean Graziosi say this on an interview once. He works with Tony Robbins and some others. He says, "You know what? If you tell me money can't buy happiness, you just haven't given enough of it away yet." And that stuck with me because I'm like, I have seen it on a small scale. And I have stories about that. But not to get totally derailed, I set up that blessing account, and I started to feel differently about my money. I want to be very clear. I wasn't making more money. As a matter of fact, I had less money because I was giving some away. I was not making instantly more money. It's not like I was doing this to try to get more. Like people talk about the law of reciprocity, and if you give, you get. Well, to me, if you actually give because you want to get, that's just selfishness disguised as generosity. That's not generosity. Generosity is a heart posture to say, I want to use this for other people, so I'm willing to do this. And then that's it. You don't have an expectation of anything in return. Usually things happen, but it's not the reason you're doing it. Anyway, I started to feel so differently about money. I think people really need to hear this. I wondered why I worried less because I had less money. I was still feeling in that season of life really like struggling financially to figure it out. And I'm feeling better about my personal finances. So, like on paper, my personal finances are starting to look worse than ever. Yet emotionally, I'm feeling better than ever. Made no sense. In the minor leagues, I made four figures a year. So for anybody doing that math, that's less than $10,000 a year. I made four figures and I never had a dime of credit card debt. And like there have been seasons launching this business, starting this practice. I've racked up credit cards, which I understand is not fiscally responsible, but you got to do what you got to do. Yet I felt better than ever. Financial picture worse than ever, feeling better than ever. And I asked a couple of my friends have PhDs in psychology. And I said to them, guys, like I asked them separately, like, can you explain to me from your perspective, like diagnose me, what is happening? Why do I feel better about what's happening with my finances, even though they don't look better on paper? And when I told them about the blessing account, they said, well, look, here's how I would explain that in my words. They dumbed it down a little for me, but they said, in psychology, we have what are called two root emotions often. We'll talk about love and fear as root emotions. That's one school of thought. And all emotions kind of stem from those root emotions, love and fear. They said, you grew up in a scarcity mindset. You always had one. You worried. You had to hoard your money, not like HGTV hoarders, but like you had your grips really tightly on finances. So you lived in a fear-based emotion around money, whether you knew it or not. Turns out I ended up knowing it because I did some deep work, but like we all have some type of relationship with money, whether we know about it or not. So I had this scarcity mindset, this worry, this fear that I had to keep what I could make. I work hard to earn it. I better not give it away. I better not sell. Like I better not be reckless with it. All of those things that can serve you to a degree, but it was controlling me. It wasn't serving me at that point. They said, but when you willingly decided to set up a separate account that was designated for other people, you instantly started to like adopt this love-based emotion around money, which is generosity. And love is always the stronger of the two emotions. So they told me that what was happening subconsciously behind the scenes, and I want to be clear, this was not my intent. I didn't even know this was a thing. But they told me strategically, I suppose, like what was happening was my subconscious around finances was rewiring. I was actually starting to adopt this love-based emotion around money. My subconscious was effectively telling itself, hey guys, you know how we used to worry about this thing? Well, we give it away now. So we don't have to worry about losing it because we're actually happy giving it. So don't worry so much anymore. Like dumbed down, but that's kind of what was happening. So psychologically speaking, I was actually rewiring my mindset around money just through the act of giving. And that has been the most transformative part of my life. And that when you ask the question, like, where was I at and where have I come from? I would say like that is the marking point, the inflection point of my financial journey where things really started to change.
I'm just sitting here thinking it's inspiring. I'm hearing my journey through your journey,
Mm,
and I know that people are listening right now. There's a lot, even though you don't want to admit it, because there's a few things that I know that people don't like to talk about.
mm,
And we like to put on images and we like to try to act like we've always had it together. My wife and I are pretty much into our I think the vulnerable word has been overused. I like when
yeah.
Simon Sinek is saying, I just want to be available now. So that's what I'm saying. I want to be authentic and available. That we learn from our avenues. And sometimes our past is someone else's present. And sometimes and you're learning like how did they get through that, and I'm resonating with everything that you've said right now. I was always taught, I was a preacher's kid growing up. It was ingrained into us, the first tenth of everything you have is the Lord's. It's none of yours to begin with.
Yep.
God's entrusting you with 90% of it, and that's how I was raised. Now other people have different pieces of it. I don't get around, I'm a 10th type guy, but our pastor made a statement in one of the service. I think this was last week or the week before last, and it's a faith based script. We're talking about faith based principles right now,
Yep.
but they're not really faith based. I mean, you can look at it in any other religion that you might be involved in, and some people call it it's karma. It's you
Yep.
reap what you sow, whatever that is. But if you sow sparingly, you reap sparingly. If you sow generously, you reap generously. And so the attitude in which you give is extremely important. So I usually
Yeah.
tell people, and I remember teaching my daughter this, if you don't want to give, don't give it. Don't give it.
That's good.
Because generously is where it is it's in that law, because sometimes you don't see the fruits of it because it's literally more about your attitude than it's
Yes.
about the quantity of what you give.
Yes.
And there's scriptures and parables that he talks about, and we know these scriptures or whatever that some people gave out of their abundance. Like it
Yep.
wasn't anything they gave out of their abundance, but Jesus said the lady that gave the 2 mites, she gave of everything that she had. It was her attitude of what she felt to give. She gave more than any of you that just flashed it around. And so I did the Dave Ramsey at one time because I'm thinking I need discipline, and I needed discipline to get out of debt. And I literally went to a very cash-based system. It worked for me. It doesn't work for someone. Do what works for you, but you've got to disconnect your reliance on money.
Mm.
And the reason why we rely, and I noticed this when I was in my 20s and 30s, Matt, is many times, this is why I think the scriptures always say it's unwise to compare yourself amongst yourself, is
Mm.
because sometimes when you're in those areas, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I was always comparing to the other executives and who I was with, like, well, they have that. And when I started to read The Millionaire Next Door, I began to understand hyper consumers.
Hmm.
They
Mhm.
consumed more than they produced. They were making good money, but they consumed it with their flashy cars and big homes. And I'm thinking, well, I got to get a big home too, just to be like them. Or I want to join the country club to be just like them,
Yep.
not realizing what was my net worth of value. I'm different now. I don't really care. Like, I'm in the piece where I love it, to where it's like I always wanted to live a thing where I didn't stress about it. It was like I don't have to balance a checkbook if I didn't want to balance a checkbook.
Yep.
But I remember what those days were and the stress that it puts because you're so worried about money. You resonate with what you're saying right now to me. I didn't have that freedom. And I deal now, like, I'm thinking people are worried about certain things in life. How do you disassociate? And you don't have to make $300,000 to disassociate from money. You can make $50,000 a year and disassociate because you're saying, I'm not allowing it to control me.
You got it.
And that is what your principle of this blessing account that you put together, that
Yep.
is, call it whatever you want to call it
Yep.
if you're not but find something that says, I take the attention off of me when I start serving others.
Mhm.
And when we start serving others, that is where we start getting that freedom. And that freedom has now allowed you to move into this wealth management process. And so take me through as you begin to mature, because you're maturing through this process. Like,
Yes.
you appear to be young to me from this point, but you got a maturity lens about you, Matt. That's pretty amazing. Now, that may have been taught with your your 7 kids. Going
Thank
on
you.
8 kids. I'm going to tease you through the rods. I love it. Like, I think it's pretty amazing. Like, I'm
I
jealous
always
of
say,
it
hey,
or
if I have
whatever,
my
but I'm
8th
like,
child on the if I have my 8th child on the way, I can't be that young.
so my standpoint, tell us through as you're maturing through this process, and then what you're giving to others. Like, how are you giving back? Because you're taking other people on this journey, I'm assuming, in your company that you have here.
This episode is sponsored by Solutions Group Services, healthcare leaders' go-to source for maximizing reimbursement and inspiring innovation. At Solutions Group Services, our technology and consulting expertise help organizations recover millions in hidden revenue without disrupting their workflow. Through our flagship AI-powered tech product, Black Ink, we reveal the dollars stuck in insurance claims and give you the map to get them back. Because for healthcare leaders, they know leaving money on the table isn't an option for their organization. Learn more at solutionsgroup.com and discoverblackink.com.
Yeah, so the generosity piece, I call it the shortcut to changing your relationship with money, changing your financial life. And I don't mean it like you make more money because you give. Your financial life to me is really like your health, your relational health around it. The longer game, but actually it's really sustainable, and it's been really eye-opening to me, is that education around how the game of money works, learning the language of money really disarms a lot of people and gets them to an emotionally stable place around personal finances. Like people worry when they open their checking account, they open their credit card statement, they get anxious and have anxiety around bills that come in the mail, and they're very fearful around their personal finances. And I've dug into it with plenty of people now at this point, enough to say the fear isn't actually about the money and whether there's enough. The fear is fear of the unknown. What happens is so many people, I'll compare it to this. You remember your freshman year of high school, right? Like that summer leading up to your freshman year, you start to get to the last week of summer and you start to feel all the nervous butterflies in your stomach because all of a sudden if your school's like mine, you're going to the big school where a lot of middle schools all come together, and it's a giant school. I don't know the layout. I don't know the teachers. I don't know any of the kids from the other schools. So if they're in my class, there's so many people I don't know. Am I going to get made fun of by the upperclassmen? Am I going to get lost? So many unknowns that like I just stewed over and worried. You fast forward 5, 10 days into your freshman year, 80% of those fears really are gone because you know your homeroom and your student, your classmates, your teachers, your schedule. You start to understand like the layout of the school. You don't worry so much anymore about what it's like to be a freshman because you are one. You're less fearful of getting into high school. Well, here's the thing, financially speaking, so many people live their lives like an incoming freshman. They worry about all of the financial stuff that they don't know about, yet they don't ever take any time, myself included. Like I didn't take time. I didn't even know that I could take time because I thought in order to understand personal finances and investing, I had to have some type of Harvard business degree, pedigree. My brothers, uncles, my whole family, they're all have degrees in economics from the most prestigious schools. I thought it was that type of world where like if I didn't have that, I wouldn't know it, so I shouldn't even try. Until I became an advisor and I'm immersed. I learned the language of money through immersion, much like you would learn Spanish by moving to Spain. I learned it by just being plopped in the world of financial advising. Like, hey, now your job is to help people with their money. You better learn how that language works really quickly. And as I studied it and learned like different types of debt instruments and different types of investments, and the language of finances is different, funding versus adding money. There's different terms and usage, but I started to understand what they meant, and my fears around it really started to fade away. Like I became a freshman. I started to learn everything that I was once fearful of. And as soon as I learned about it, my fears started to go away and I started to worry way less about it. And that's an endless journey. Like I'm a continual learner. I'll never stop learning. So the more I learn, the less I worry and the more strategic I am with money. The more money looks like chess pieces on a chessboard than it does this emotional bear in my head that I don't know what to do with. And I'm telling you, today's day and age, there is no shortage of information. That's the facts. There is a ton of info. I think true wisdom is in discernment. So it's trying to understand what's the right information for me to listen to. But I can tell everybody your starting point, if you have no basis of where you want to begin your personal financial journey, you could start with something like ChatGPT and say, hey, here's what my financial picture looks like. I want to get really good with money. I don't know where to start. Where do I begin? What 5 questions should I ask?
So let me
And
ask you this question because and then I'm gonna share with the audience. I'm gonna share from a personal journey side of it that it may help someone or whatever. Um, do you think, and from what you're dealing with in your company and the many clients that you have, relative to that maybe they're embarrassed to share their financial picture? And so this is the journey that I went on. I'm going to share it in just a minute because
yeah,
I'm going to be open about a few things that I think sometimes it might be us because we might be embarrassed with our financial picture. Or we might say, what are they going to think? Do you experience that at all?
totally, totally. There's shame around it and worry and anxiety around. It's what you said earlier. You compare yourself to where you think you should be. You compare yourself to what you believe. You don't know what other people's bank accounts look like. You just assume because of what they do with their life. I've had, and look, like I said, I've had thousands of conversations. I have clients that have 100 million plus dollar net worths, multi hundred millions, and I have people who have started out, right? It doesn't matter almost how much money they have in the bank. I have heard it from people who have $1 million and say, I know I'm just a small fry. Like it's only $1 million. And I've heard it from people who have 20 grand who say, I know I'm just a small fry for you. I just have 20 grand. It's all relative to what people believe they they should have at whatever stage of their journey they're on. And it really relates to their relationship around money. It has nothing to do with their actual life stage. And it's incredible to think. Can you imagine somebody who has $1 million says, I know I'm just a small fry, and the same language comes out of somebody who has 20 grand, 10 grand, 5 grand. They say the same thing, and it's because of exactly what you're talking about. I've heard it. They're embarrassed that they feel like they should be farther along than they are for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I want to give that too, because I know people that are listening today, they're going to resonate. They're going to think, Asbel, for real? And my wife and I do a podcast called A Cup of Real, and we kind of keep it very open and authentic. We talk about a lot of different things, but I wanted just to share this because I'm resonating with what you said about the fear about, well,
Mm,
what if I speak to a wealth manager and they're thinking you should be so much farther along? Or,
yeah.
you could have done this, because I was the type that as I got into it, I self-learned. Of course, we didn't have Chat GPT then. I was
Right.
Googling. I was talking to friends around, like people that I admired. Tell me what you did, how, whatever. And I'm
Brilliant.
thinking, as I started moving into my career and it became a senior executive, then we started a business together. And then I moved into, because I'm like thinking, why are you not hiring someone that just does this? This is what they do for a living. This is their subject matter expertise. Just like it is with you, it's kind of a scalpel approach, jack of all trades, master of none. There's general practitioners that are needed. General medicine is needed. But if I've got something that's going on with the brain, I'm going to a neurosurgeon. Does that make
Yes.
sense? And so why aren't you doing this? And you're just trying to learn about something that you didn't go to school for. You're learning it anecdotally through immersion, basically. You've been doing okay with it, but what if you could do even better? And I didn't hire my first financial advisor until 6 years ago. And I can look at now saying, why did you not do this 15 years ago? You could probably even be worth more and have
Mm,
more, because they could have told you pitfalls that you were learning. Why did I not do that? And I think it is what you just said. I think it was fear of the unknown. I'm processing right now as you're talking, is that I wonder if it was something to do with shame, maybe. I know it was definitely to do with comparison. Like, well, man, this is pretty open and vulnerable. Like, I'm letting you into my, like, literally when you let somebody into your finances and what your
yep.
financial health, I'm really letting you in. And do I trust you in that environment? And because I'm going to trust you. And then you hear people say, well, that financial man, they got somebody there, they lost all their savings because they manipulated them. That is an area that I had to process through. And
Mm,
I could have said, you know what? And I could have talked myself out of it and still been on that and still have probably been doing okay. But I'm doing fantastic because I hired people.
mm,
I came into to contact with someone else because I'm working through trust and all this. And then they were telling me, have you ever thought about a charitable, irrevocable trust that you can do this? Because I'm like thinking, I want to figure out how to get rid of paying all these taxes all the time. I'm done with this is a joke. And they're like, well,
yep.
how are you giving? They started telling me, I'm thinking, I'm hiring you for that. Nobody's ever told me that. You've got, so it's that type of thing that I think sometimes comes out of our capacity and we feel like, well, we're doing okay with it. You've hired, and I'm like thinking, I want the right team. And I do this in our business. I'm hiring the right team with the right, and I can see it in the benefits that it's happening down to the P&L. We can see it, boom, boom. But in
Yep.
my own personal, I'm not aligning the same thing. And why am I not constructing the same thing? And it isn't as expensive as people think it is.
Mm-mm.
And it doesn't matter where you are on that, whether it's 20,000 as you gave or it's $100 million, you can start, but you've got to be honest with yourself. And I had to have a look in the mirror, Matt, and say, why are you preaching one thing and living another? And that was hard for me to admit to myself, thinking, you're out there telling people, you're selling services and telling them my stuff is the best.
Mm.
and you know it and you can prove it, but yet you're not living out. I'm going to say what you preach because we're faith-based, but you're not living out what you preach. And
Right.
I literally, that's the culture that we're talking about in our company. It's like, we are not going to preach something or teach something, consult on something or talk that we are not currently living out, whether it's through artificial intelligence. It doesn't matter what it is right now. And so this financial side of it is hit home with me. And we connected for a reason, because your mind's eye is very faith-based in its approach.
Mm.
And it's like, we've got to disassociate ourselves from this. And so whatever you're doing, Matt, and I'm hoping whoever's listening to this right now to share, it's, you will not get to where you want to get. And if you're limiting yourself because of what's coming into your bank account, if you do not do something differently, you're always going to get what you've always gotten. It's insanity. You'll never pull
Mm.
yourself out. As a society, as Americans, we can deflect and blame government because they're not giving us, they're taxing us all the time. Sure, I'd love to pay less taxes or whatever, but let me tell you something. What I can't control is the controllables. And the only person I can control is, guess who?
Yourself.
Self.
That's
And
it.
that's what you did. You said, you know what? I have to have a conversation with self. And the way that you did it is, I got to set something up because my brain thinks in buckets.
Yep.
And you said, if I can get it out into this bucket, that works for me. Buckets may not work for a person that's listening here, but
Right.
find out. And there are people like you that can help them.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm like, this is a podcast about you, not me, but I wanted to, because you're resonating with some things that are getting me excited. Like, this can revolutionize a society that constantly is looking for a handout versus how do we help somebody up? How do we as Christians help you? Like they say, I can give you a fish and feed you for today, or I can give you a fishing rod and teach you how to fish so you can eat for a lifetime. This
Yes.
is what we're doing here today. I mean,
You
this
got
is
it.
what we should be doing as leaders.
That's so good.
As
And you
leaders.
said something about you 6 years ago, and I appreciate you sharing that, hiring somebody for the first time. There is probably 1, 2, 3 people maybe in your
And I'm
entire life.
49, just so everybody knows. So don't say that it was 43 before I hired my first financial for real.
Yeah.
I'm like
And
thinking, how hard-headed were you? You should have done this a
well,
long time ago.
there's only 1, 2, 3 people maybe that you share your financial picture with, because you do feel like you get undressed. It feels very vulnerable and personal. Most of the people that find out that wind up working with me because they see my journey, they understand what I'm going after, and that I feel uniquely called, just as you do, to a big purpose and a high vision. And I recognize, in order to accomplish that God-sized dream on my heart, it's going to take a lot. People I work with, they feel the same way, and they come to this realization, kind of like what you did, is like, I don't want to be out of control of it, meaning I don't want to have a blind eye to the money. I want to understand what's happening. So they really appreciate the unique investment strategy. They appreciate the collaboration, the conversation about it. But they also recognize, if I'm trying to live into my giftedness and go there and do that thing that I feel called to do, then I need to shed whatever it is that's slowing me down and holding me back, and entrust a team and trust other people in my lives to handle certain parts of that life, so that I can really focus on what I feel called to do. It's in a lot of ways, you hire a house cleaner or a landscaper or whatever, not because you can't do those jobs, but because those jobs are slowing you down from living into your giftedness to what you feel like is on your heart. And a lot of the ways I come alongside people and help them go faster and help them get places where they're trying to get to, because they're able to shed a lot of what they worried about, because I'm really communicative and I have a unique investment style that they can articulate back to me. So they don't feel like they're sitting on the sidelines and waiting, just whatever the market does is what they're going to do. They feel like they're in the game and they understand what's happening. They understand what their financial plan says, all these things, but it's not on their plate anymore. They're like, give me that update, like give me the balance sheet, give me the pro forma. Here we go. Let's move forward. I'm going, you know? And it's effectively helps them go faster. And that's like a massive unlock for those high capacity families I enjoy working with.
So let me ask you this last question. I know we're getting kind of down to the end of the podcast, but I want to ask you kind of a final question, and then I'm going to end it with, I want people to know if they want to kind of talk more to you. Maybe they're starting on this journey. Maybe they're already on the journey. Maybe they have a financial and they're like thinking, I like the concept here. I still worry about money. I still have,
Yeah.
I want you to talk through, and John Maxwell talks about getting out of the people pile. And that is what you did. You mentioned that earlier saying, okay, financial, they're all here, but I want to do something different, something unique. So
Yeah.
reconstructing, doing all that. Tell me for those that are listening today is, what do you do differently? How did you differentiate yourself out of the people pile? Why are people, because you're talking more than just money. So tell us about that.
That's a fair question. Well, I don't really hear many people in my world speak about money the way I do.
I
I
don't. I will be the first to say that. That's why you're here.
Thanks. I believe much more in a we, not me financial plan. I think our industry is really misaligned in terms of our encouragement and our education around how to use and view money. Often it's like protect yourself, put your money in a barn, and then when you get enough, you build a bigger barn kind of thing. That's kind of like the mentality and the approach toward personal finance, if I'm being honest. It's that, and I say, what about us? What more can you do if your focus is not on you, but on those you serve and those lives you touch? And sometimes that actually means you should invest a little more aggressively than you are, as one example. Meaning, I'll have challenging conversations with people that maybe they have enough money, they've made a bunch of money, enough meaning like they can live pretty set for the rest of their lives, but they have a lot of life to live. And I might say to them, like the parable of the talents, like, why are you burying this? Why are you only investing like you're a 95-year-old when actually you're 50? You got a lot of life to live. If you have the ability to grow your income and grow your worth, how much more good could you do? And why wouldn't you want to do that? Because our industry says, hey, once you got enough, get conservative, hoard it, just let it bleed out and don't let it run out. That's the plan. So I'll have pretty challenging conversations there. I think probably one of the biggest differentiators, though, if I'm going to be honest, in like the actual nuts and bolts of my world, is that I don't invest in a single fund for anybody. Everything I do is individual equities, individual stocks, and the strategy is so clear that any client of mine can explain it back to me. And I think that goes back to that transparency and the education piece. People I like to work with that gravitate toward me, those all in, head first diving type people, they like to feel in the game of whatever game of life they're playing, whether it's literal games of basketball in the backyard or the game of investing or the game of entrepreneurship. They like to feel like they're in it and they're in the arena. They're not on the sidelines watching. And the only way for them to really feel comfortable being in the arena with investments is either they spend, like you said, a lot of their time learning it and understanding and educating and tracking and monitoring and making trades, or they understand the strategy around why we're buying what we're buying, when we're selling what we're selling, why are we buying the new thing after we sell something, and they feel like they understand the mechanics, but they're not the ones to pull the levers. That allows them to feel in the game without the control of the lever, and it helps them feel good and move forward faster. So I think probably the individual equity strategies that I use, no bonds, no funds, it's a really unique move in my world. But again, it all boils back down to education, transparency, and that ability, if you have the ability to earn, why do you stop? To me, a bond is often, it's like a Band-Aid or it's like a pacifier of emotion, oftentimes. And there's for certain people, I'm not telling, this is not a blanket statement. There's some people that it really makes a lot of sense for. Typically, the people in my world are in the accumulating, the earning phases of life. They have children, they're moving, they're buying homes, second homes, starting businesses, growing their careers. They're not retired, living fat off the hog. And and often a bond won't serve them in their unique roles. So I hope that answers the question. What probably makes me a little bit different once we get in, you pull behind the curtain a little bit.
So, if you're listening today, the strategy, it resonates with me. I know this is the first time I've really had a conversation with you about what makes you
Yeah.
unique as a financial advisor.
Yeah.
And some of the things that you're saying are resonating with me to give me aha moments to say a few things as well as I'm kind of learning it. Um, and understanding the strategy. And I love that you're very strategic. I'm a strategic guy.
Yeah.
And I like doing things differently than others do. That's pretty amazing to me. But I want to say one thing that resonated with me, and this is more from the faith-based community side, that you talked about the talents. And those that don't understand the parable of the talents, it's actually in the Gospels. And it was
I
Jesus
should
that
have explained that. Sorry.
Jesus was talking about that, he gave the ruler at the time, and I'm going to paraphrase this through the
Yeah.
process, but gave one of his servants 5 talents and told him to go invest, and he invested it and made it 10. He gave another one, I think it was 3 or 2,
Yep.
doubled it, basically doubled it into 1. He gave 1. And that individual just said, I want to keep it. I want to protect it for the master. And he went and buried it and hid it. So when the master came back, he asked and pulled his servants, and the servants came back and they all doubled him, except for the one said he was all excited and happy and said, but master, I kept it for you and I hid it. And the master was upset with him and basically terminated him. The scriptures use other things because it's a parable of another thing, but it kind of tells you what the expectation is and to not hoard, which is what you're saying. So you're taking faith-based principles
Yeah.
and saying, if we apply these faith-based principles to financial management, you can even take more. Like the Catholic Charities, I quote this all the time because I'm in healthcare. They talk about no margin, no mission. So you
Hmm.
have to have margin in order to have mission. So I can't fulfill my purpose unless I've got margin to be able to build it. So I have out of the overflow is what I can. I've got to take care of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I've got to take care of, I got to have food, water, and shelter.
Yep.
And if all I'm spending is on and I don't have a way to invest that, Jim Rohn has always indicated this. I love him. Amazing guy. Warren Buffett's another amazing guy that talks about that. Start somewhere. It doesn't matter.
Mm.
You have $5.
Mm.
You have 10. You just start the act of it. It's consistency that begins to build it. Matt, I can't tell you how happy I am that you took this opportunity. And I know it's a little different from my podcast of talking about wealth management, but I wanted to say that from a difference because of healthcare leaders that are listening to this, whether you're a CEO of a company, whether you're just listening and trying to figure, I'm just getting started. I've always been afraid of it. We all have.
Yeah.
We all
Yeah.
have. I personally have been very afraid of what do I do with money, the excess. I wanted to hoard. I've had extra money. And I used to when I first started, dude, I would just put it in a savings account. I was happy I was getting 0.3% or whatever that number was. And then found out, you can go to American Express for 3.5%. I'm like, heck to the no. This is where I literally started to get into it and say, you've got to release and bring in experts that can start managing this outside of putting it into a fund. You taught me something today.
Mm.
That was an aha moment to me that we're going to have an off-camera call about. That was pretty amazing.
Thanks, man. This has
Through
been
the
so
process.
fun.
But I'm going to stop here and see if you've got anything left that you want the listeners, when you're talking about this whole process and this journey that you've been on of basically bifurcating out the money, not letting money rule you anymore. Anything you want to, last words you want to leave for the audience?
First, yes, thank you for this opportunity. I know it's not a healthcare specific conversation, but it is a universal conversation. We all, no matter you like money or don't like money, even hospitals, even churches, all nonprofits, they need money to run. That's just the world we live in. So a lot of money in the right hands can do a lot of good. That's how I see it. I recorded a 3-part video series, kind of like an educational series, on a lot of what we talked about. And if any of your listeners want it, it's free. It'll cost maybe an email address. That's it. You follow me on Instagram. It's just my name, at Matt Morizio, and send me a message, and I will send you the link to that course. And it'll cost you nothing if you want to kind of dig in and learn some more without maybe talking to somebody. And I also want to offer, because I don't always talk about this book and the investment strategy, but you asked, and that book was mailed to me by, his name is Ben Beck, is the managing partner of the first firm I worked for, because I said, what makes you different?
Who's that? What's the name of the book and the author?
The book is called Dancing with the Analysts by David Malik. And the guy named Ben Beck, he mailed it to me. He's the managing partner of the old firm I worked for, because before I joined, remember when I told you at the beginning of this conversation, I prayed and prayed for no reasons not to join the industry? One of my efforts to prove that he was like every other financial advisor, because that's why I didn't want to join the industry, as I was praying, like, please don't let this be a thing. I asked him, like, why are you any different than any other advisor? And it was that investment strategy that he articulated that I had never heard before. And he said, I'm going to mail you a book. And it's written by my mentor. And if it describes, it's in the book, exactly how we invest. It's a story. It's not a finance textbook. But if you read it and you want to continue this conversation, let's do it. And if not, no hard feelings. And I had two young twins, brand new twins at the time, a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, excuse me. So I had no sleep. And now this guy mails this book to me, and I'm like, crap. Now the ball's in my court and I have to do it. Like, he followed up, which people often don't do, but I'm like, now I got to read the book. Eventually I read the book. I was so turned on to the investment strategy. It is the primary reason, aside from prayer, obviously, but it was the driver that said, I want to go and do this. I want to do it. I want to get into this industry and do it like this. So if anybody heard that and said, I'm curious, I will mail you a copy of the book in the same way it was mailed to me. I'm not promising it will literally change the trajectory of your life the way it did mine. I was in a unique position that book represented at the time. But I will mail you a copy. I'll mail anybody that listens. Just send me a DM on Instagram or find my website, reconstructingwealth.com. There's a contact page. Tell me you would like a copy of the book. I literally will mail you one, no strings attached, costs you nothing. I think that because of what it's done in my life, if I can help somebody in some way, shape, or form to even a fraction of that percentage, how it's changed mine, I'm happy to share that.
So that's Instagram at Matt Morizio for Instagram, and then reconstructingwealth.com. That'll also be available to them. They'll be tagged. That'll be very easy for any of the podcast listeners to get to you as well. Wow,
Yeah.
Matt, thank you very, very, very much for joining us. And hopefully our viewers learned something today. I learned some things today, and to lean into the uncomfortable. If you're not doing this, if maybe you've got a financial advisor and there were some aha moments today, this is something to lean into. So
Yeah.
thanks for joining us, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so fun.